It is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you Mr. Hooper Dunbar. I have a very short, he asked me just to do a very short bio on him. He says, no need for introduction, but I think there is. But it will take hours and hours to befittingly introduce him. Hooper Cameron Dunbar needs no introduction for many of you. However, we want you to appreciate the experiences that made him who he is today. He was born in Los Angeles and grew up with an interest in the stage, both as an actor and a set designer. As a member of the Screen Actor Guilds, he acted in screenplays for the major studios like Columbia, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and 20th Century Fox. He traded in his film career in 1958 for a life of service, pioneering in Central and South America for the Baha'i faith. He and his wife, Marilyn, transcended many hardships as a result of this choice. Hooper was elected to the First National Spiritual Assembly of Nicaragua in 1961, and by 1968, he was a counselor for the Americas. In 1973, Mr. Dunbar became one of the founding members of the International Teaching Center. 15 years later, he was elected to the Universal House of Justice. During his 30 years in Haifa, Mr. Dunbar held weekly firesides with all the youth volunteers. Known for his lecture series, books, and eagerness to help others enrich their spiritual lives, he has spoken on many topics, not only regarding the sacred text and the history and the administration of the faith, but also about art as a mystical process and a path to service. His own work continues to illustrate that process. His abstract art has been widely exhibited in New York and in art collections around the world. Friends, this weekend, we are pleased to welcome him to share his insights about defining and enriching our Baha'i life. Please welcome Mr. Hooper Dunbar.
Thank you very much. How does this thing work? Can you hear well enough there? I'll try to pay attention. I'm very good at keeping attention on mics. So friends, so nice to be here. What an opportunity we have for reflection and fellowship here after a delay of several years. Lovely to see you. I don't know how many of you have been here before. Welcome. I saw that how many are over 30 a bit a bit earlier. So we're all, in a sense, old timers. There's some youth here, and they're catching up quick, I'm sure. What I wanted to do just is to refocus us, mostly because of the situation we're in and the plan we're in. I don't much take time addressing the different aspects of the 9-year plan because we have institutions that are guiding the friends and refreshing us as to the requirements. But I do have a certain apprehension about if we lose track of the source of the confirmations and the divine assistance, which our writings repeatedly emphasize as the only source of movement and growth. We can increase members, but if they're lukewarm and uninformed, it doesn't really help the cause. So we need to constantly be trying to go back to the source of understanding what it is that has caused the faith to grow in the first place, and what is it that causes us to grow in the faith, and what it is that we can offer to others, which will be a confirmation. The world is not very receptive at the moment to the faith, as much as we proclaim it to be such. The Guardian in his days was saying that maybe 2% of the population was receptive. And he was addressing America in particular. That means that 2% of the population, perhaps still, maybe more at this point, are receptive or waiting souls, so to speak, could be defined as waiting souls. And the Guardian, in letters, he said that he hoped the friends would pray at dawn to be able to find waiting souls. That's an individual method. I hope you'll keep that in mind, along with the other prayer that Mr. Sears used to say would be helpful. Please also help me to recognize them when I meet them. This guy won't, this is not going to be, they won't be. No. It's amazing how the name of Baha'u'llah and of the faith can reach souls. And people call me and tell me about their experiences and as Uber drivers and things, where it really is amazing how much miracles take place. Baha'u'llah moves people around and they're in your taxi and then you're talking to them about the faith, and he says, my father was a Baha'i and I've kind of lost vision of it and everything. Suddenly, time after time, things like that's happening. Another friend in Australia that's teaching Congolese refugees to Australia the faith. And he has to get on Zoom and to be able to translate Swahili and Bemba and other native languages. And it's created a fire. And when they call to Congo, somebody that can help us translate? Yes, I know. When you call there and they say, oh, my mother's a Baha'i, or oh, my sister's a Baha'i from the Congo. So it just all reverberates. There's all kinds of things that are going on behind the scenes if we trust. Place your trust in God. Place your trust in Baha'u'llah. To sharpen our spiritual wits, so to speak, and hopefully complementary to what Todd is breaking us out into, that is the vision of the cause as reality and all the rest as superficiality and a distraction. The Guardian said materialism, which has humanity in its grip for the most part now, is the greatest enemy of the cause. And of course, this is not just the collection of of material goods, as you would think. It sounds like materialism is that, but it's the secularization of the world, a completely false image one that predisposes you to resist the cause when you hear about it. And this is why I think we need to try to attract the ones that are ready for the faith. If we can make that connection in our inner lives and with our beloved. I wanted to revisit the general theme of essential verities of the Baha'i revelation. What do we think of when we think of essential verities? What are the main verities of the cause? And I think that most of us will say, well, oneness of mankind and independent investigation of truth, which, granted, are truths that Shoghi Effendi categorizes as principles. What does he say about verities? I was reminded as I read through the letters, editing the letters of the Guardian to Latin America, how often he repeated in his letters to the nascent national assemblies that were being born. There was first 2, South America and Central America, then 4 was the Caribbean and Central America and North and South America. And he talks over and over about familiarizing the friends, the newly fledged friends, with the essential verities of the faith. And then he goes on to say a whole list of other things. They would say, well, aren't they the verities? Turns out that they're not. Turns out that the Guardian, way back in 1934, outlined for us the essential verities of the faith. Let's take a look and see what he said here. This is an outline of a study course that I put together, which you're able to have copies of after this, if you'd like. To go back to the words of the Guardian to refresh us as to the very specific focus he's placed on these things. This is from the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. You may perhaps recognize it. The dispensation opens with the announcement of the 90th anniversary of the birth of the Baha'i revelation, which of course was the revelation of the Bab. But from the beginning, Shoghi Effendi has those two knit together. There can't be any separation. And the uniqueness, he tells us, of the time we live in is that we have twin manifestations of God. That the source of guidance and protection for the cause proceeds from both the Bab and Baha'u'llah. And that he calls attention to a passage in the Will and Testament of Abd-Baha where that is very clearly stated, and he says this is the fundamental of Baha'i belief, is this, that we have two manifestations that are acting both in the case of the guidance of the Guardian and the Universal House of Justice. We who at this hour find ourselves standing on the threshold of the last decade of the first century of the Baha'i era, I need to know about things like the dispensation and the era and the cycle. If you're carefully reading the writings, you'll be able to define those things for yourself. Pause to reflect upon the mysterious dispensations of so august, so momentous a revelation. How vast, how entrancing the panorama which the revolution of 80 years and 10 unrolls before our eyes. Its towering grandeur well nigh overwhelms us. To merely contemplate this unique spectacle, to visualize, however dimly, the circumstances attending the birth and gradual unfoldment of this supreme theophany, to recall even in the barest outline the woeful struggles that proclaimed its rise and accelerated its march, and which indeed continue to assail the cause. will suffice to convince every unbiased observer of those eternal truths that motivate its life and which must continue to impel it forward until it achieves its destined ascendancy. And here's where the importance is that we identify what are these eternal truths. Synonym of essential verities, basically. These are extracted from the dispensations, not right in the order it is, but it gets us to the point of what we're trying to emphasize here. My chief concern is to call the attention to certain fundamental verities, the elucidation of which must tremendously assist them in the effective prosecution of their mighty enterprise. Here our Velayat, our friend, the guardian, is advising us. Then he raises the question that the international status of the faith back in the 30s demands its root principles be definitely clarified. Dearly beloved friends, I feel it incumbent upon me, by virtue of the obligations or responsibilities as guardian of the faith of Baha'u'llah, I am called upon to discharge, to lay special stress at a time when the light of publicity is being increasingly focused upon us, upon certain truths which lie at the basis of our faith and the integrity of which it is our first duty to safeguard. That gives us some task on these verities, if valiantly upheld and properly assimilated. Oh, so much to assimilate. Assimilation being a process of seeing words on the paper and taking them into our own consciousness and letting the content of them fill our awareness of their importance, and then being able to hold that and act on it. These verities, if valiantly upheld and properly assimilated, will, I am convinced, powerfully reinforce the vigor of our spiritual life and greatly assist in counteracting the machinations of an implacable and vigilant enemy. Then he adds this terrific paragraph: to strive to obtain a more adequate understanding of the significance of Baha'u'llah's stupendous revelation must, it is my unalterable conviction, remain the first obligation and the object of the constant endeavor of each one of its loyal adherents. Of the 1930s, friends, or does this sound like something a bit more long-lasting? An exact, then he warns us, of course, an exact and thorough comprehension of so vast a system, so sublime a revelation, so sacred a trust, is for obvious reasons beyond the reach and ken of our finite minds. We can, however, and it is our bounden duty to seek to refresh, to derive fresh inspiration and added sustenance as we labor for the propagation of his faith through a clearer apprehension of the truths it enshrines and the principles on which it is based. He's making a distinction here, obviously. The faith of Baha'u'llah should indeed be regarded, if we wish to be faithful to the tremendous implications of its message, as the culmination of a cycle, the final stage in a series of successive, preliminary, and progressive revelations. These, beginning with Adam and ending with the Bab, have paved the way and anticipated with an ever-increasing emphasis the advent of that day of days in which he who is the promise of all ages should be made manifest. To this truth, the utterances of Baha'u'llah abundantly testify. A mere reference to the claims which he in vehement language and with compelling power he himself has repeatedly advanced, cannot but fully demonstrate the character of the revelation of which he was the chosen bearer. To the words that have streamed from his pen, the fountainhead of an impetuous revelation, we should therefore direct our attention if we wish to obtain a clearer understanding of the importance and meaning, whether in his assertion of the unprecedented claim. Now he's beginning to outline what the content of these verities is going to be. The unprecedented claim he has advanced, or his allusions to the mysterious forces he has released, to extol the glories of his long-awaited day, or to magnify the station which they who have recognized its hidden virtues will attain, Baha'u'llah, and to an almost equal extent the Bab and Abdu'l-Baha, have bequeathed to posterity minds of such inestimable wealth as none of us who belong to this generation can befittingly estimate. We're another generation now, we should be making a special effort here. Such testimonies bearing on this theme are impregnated with such power and reveal such beauty as only those who are versed in the languages in which they were originally revealed can claim to have sufficiently appreciated. And Todd is hinting at the various aspects, important enough that we have the Guardian to transpose it into English, but it's still a translation. And he himself says that the originals, it can never be compared with the originals, and blesses the people who've gone ahead of us and learned the Arabic language. So numerous are these testimonies that a whole volume would be required to be written in order to compile the most outstanding among them. My work in the Holy Land involved me work with the archives and with the original texts. And you know, the Guardian talks about 100 volumes of revelation. There are actually 100 notebooks with leather covers and handwritten by Zain, mostly by Zain al-Mughrabi, copying the tablets as they were coming through. As they would send it out, they'd also make a copy, and that's there. And the House of Justice found that in those original volumes, there's some light pencil lining down the margins here and there. And those become the quotes in the dispensation and become the quotes in the gleanings that the Guardian went through and mined initially. He said he couldn't do the complete job, but they started it. He's telling us a whole volume would be required to be written in order to compile the most outstanding of these quotations. All I can venture to attempt at present is to share with you only such passages as I have been able to glean from his voluminous writings. A mere reference to the claims, which in vehement language and with compelling power he himself has repeatedly advanced, cannot but fully demonstrate the character of the revelation of which he was the chosen bearer. To the words that have streamed forth from his pen, the fountainhead of so impetuous a revelation, we should therefore direct our attention if we wish to obtain a clear understanding of its importance and meaning. Then it begins the dispensation to have quotation after quotation from Baha'u'llah. I've organized them under the titles that are hinted at in these previous introductory statements by the Guardian. So we have his assertion of the unprecedented claim he has advanced. And then if you receive this copies of this, you'll see, or if you go back to the original dispensation, you'll see what they consist of. They're verities that are quite different from what you might expect if you hadn't read them, or if you haven't even read them recently. I was so surprised. I divided this out on separate pages, one per page. Look at it, think about it. On a long written page, smaller text, you kind of don't catch up with all of it. But look at these one by one. In fact, I have these at my bedside to be able to read continually. You get to the end and go back to the beginning again. Now this terrific, it's about 48 of these, I think, quotes from Baha'u'llah, divided into different sections. This first one is a fairly long one. He relates it to past religions and things. Then there's a section about the full potencies of his invincible power. Let's stop and read one of these. By the righteousness of God, should a man all alone arise in the name of Baha and put on the armor of his love, him will the Almighty cause to be victorious, though the forces of earth and heaven be arrayed against him. The glories of his long-awaited day. Friends, again, and Todd drew attention to this in 1939, The Guardian gave us the advent of divine justice. At the very end of that is a section which also is available, and we can pass that out as well electronically, called Immortal Passages. Now, there the Guardian expands on this same theme and talks about the stations and functions of his loved ones, eulogies of the greatness of the cause, importance of teaching, the dangers he foreshadows ahead for the cause, the counsels he imparts, warnings he utters, vistas he discloses, assurances and promises he gives. These dynamic and typical example of Baha'u'llah's sublime utterance, each having a direct bearing on the tasks which actually face or lie ahead of the American Baha'i community, cannot fail to produce on the minds and hearts of any one of its members who approaches them with befitting humility and detachment such powerful reactions as to illuminate his entire being and intensify tremendously his daily exertions. Feeling tired? What a source of extra power here. Again, if you take those and look at them and rehearse them and think about them, the Guardian was saying that there are various steps that we need to take as Baha'is, and they were the obvious ones, like we need to pray, we need to meditate, we need to study the writings, and then we need to act as a result of the first three. The first three are mingled together because it's a constant part of our Baha'i life, so to speak. Interestingly enough, Shoghi Effendi has emphasized that meditation is not prayer. It's different from prayer. It's thinking, it's reflecting on the meaning of the verses and prayers that we've said. So sometimes we think, I remember when I was a new Baha'i, they said, be careful that you don't be one of those Baha'is that, calls up God and says everything he wants and hangs up. Stay online a little bit and see if there's some answer there that you might receive along the way. Thought that was a very pointed example. This goes on here. It so exalts the station of the manifestation in the whole of it, in the context of it, that Shoghi Effendi comments and even adds a word of warning to us about how to understand these quotations, these essential verities. Irresistible power of his law, the resistless power infused into his revelation. These are terrific, and they're from various works of Baha'u'llah. Sometimes you'll recognize them, sometimes you'll find them in the gleanings. Gleanings. Shaykh Effendi says, the constant companion of every faithful believer. You shouldn't have it more than any distance from your arm that you can't grab it. You should grab it, and if not, you should have, well, you have it in your phone probably, and you have it in your purse or whatever it is. The gleanings. My wife and I have, in daily readings that we have, we read it from the beginning to the end, and then we start over again, and we've done 3 or 4 times, and just beginning to recognize the sections and the emphasis that is placed on those things. Shaykh Effendi, out of the whole revelation, has chosen this, and he's also said in a letter to the American National Assembly that everything that he chose is acceptable for the public. There are things that are strange for the public in the writings. They're maybe too mystic, or who knows what he had in mind. But these are you're quite able to put this in the library and everything else and give it to the Baha'is. Some of the Baha'is back in the 30s were complaining, but we don't have a Bible. And that's what the first thing they ask us, where's your Bible? I don't think there's anything grander than we can present on the gleanings. The gleanings, which contain 6 long sections extracted from the Igan, from the Book of Certitude. Something that I've compiled out also from there that might be considered like the heart of the Igan. Then we have these sections from Abdu'l-Baha. Terrific things, so encouraging, friends. If you haven't been back to visit this in a while, please make a point of it. Then the next part of the dispensation is a consideration by Shaykh Effendi of the nature of the manifestation of God. Dearly beloved friends, enough has been said, and the quoted excerpts from the writings of the Bab of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha are sufficiently numerous and varied to convince the conscientious reader of the sublimity of this unique cycle in the world's religious history. It would be utterly impossible to over-exaggerate its significance or to overrate the influence it has exerted and which it must increasingly exert as its great system unfolds itself amidst the welter of a collapsing civilization. To whoever may read these pages, a word of warning seems, however, advisable before I proceed further with the development of my argument. Let no one meditating in the light of the aforequoted passages on the nature of the revelation of Baha'u'llah mistake its character or misconstrue the intent of its author. The divinity attributed to so great a being, and the complete incarnation of the names and attributes of God in so exalted a person should under no circumstances be misconceived or misinterpreted. How many possibilities we have of misconceiving and misinterpreting it, I can only imagine. The human temple that has been made the vehicle of so overpowering a revelation must, if we be faithful to the tenets of our faith, ever remain entirely distinguished from that innermost spirit of spirits and eternal essence of essences, that invisible yet rational God who, however much we extol the divinity of his manifestations on earth, can in no wise incarnate his infinite, his unknowable, his incorruptible, and all-embracing reality in the concrete and limited frame of a mortal being. Indeed, the God who could so incarnate his own reality would, in the light of the teachings of Baha'u'llah, cease immediately to be God. So crude and fantastic a theory of divine incarnation is as removed from and incompatible with the essentials of Baha'i belief as are the no less inadmissible pantheistic and anthropomorphic conceptions of God, both of which the utterances of Baha'u'llah emphatically repudiate, and the fallacy of which they expose. He who in unnumbered passages claimed his utterance to be the voice of divinity, the call of God himself, thus solemnly affirms in the Kitab-i-Gan. These are very important for our conceptualizing our understanding of the manifestation of God. To every discerning and illumined heart, it's evident that God, the unknowable essence, the divine being, is immeasurably exalted beyond every human attribute, such as corporeal existence, ascent and descent, egress and regress. I would recommend to you the reading of these various paragraphs. I don't want to read them all. I want to go on. From time immemorial, Baha'u'llah, speaking of God, explains, He, the divine being, has been veiled in the ineffable sanctity of His exalted self, and will everlastingly continue to be wrapped in the impenetrable mystery of His unknowable essence. In these powerful passages, 10,000 prophets, each of Moses, are thunderstruck upon the Sinai of their search at God's forbidding voice, Thou shalt never behold me. Whilst a myriad messengers, each as great as Jesus, stand dismayed upon their heavenly thrones by the interdiction, Mine essence thou shalt never apprehend. I think it's helped us a lot to reflect on various aspects of Baha'u'llah's revelation, to break down this problem of God appeared once on this little puny planet Earth. Mr. Alinga told me, Shoghi Effendi said to him that he had heard Abdul Baha say several times that this was the most backward of the planets in our solar system, that there were civilizations far, far superior to our own, even on near planets. Now, science hasn't got that far, but science takes a while to catch up. I was in high school, I remember they were saying the only planet, the only planet, and the only sun in the solar system that has planets is this one. The high school textbook. That's not so long ago, in case everything science strikes you as the absolute truth. It's not, it's an evolving thing. Abdul Baha says, he says that in a talk in America, when he was here, he said the religion is an effulgence of the sun of truth. Beautiful image we get from that. 2 paragraphs on, he says, science is an effulgence of the sun of truth. True science and true religion are in absolute accord with each other. In fact, all true sciences is something that comes first from the other world. There's no ideas. We don't have any ideas or inventions of our own. We're totally hopeless. We appear to have will to do things on our own, but he says there's no power but God. All good comes from God, and all evil comes from, guess who? Your own selves. This is very, it means also, this also means we all have this immediate connection with the Creator. And we have to constantly renew, as taught is hinted to us, our relationship, our conscious relationship. Does it permeate beyond what commonly we think of as reason? Is there really a dichotomy, faith versus reason. It's a ridiculous kind of concept. The whole of Revelation has been specifically given to our needs, and our needs on this planet at this time. Now, what does he say? He says that every fixed star in the universe that we can see has planets, and every planet its creatures. Now we know that the scale, how this works here, I can't imagine any reason why it wouldn't work exactly the same. They're souls that need to become consciously aware and prepare themselves to be able to enter in a exalted way into the next world, wherever they are. Well, suddenly you've got manifestations of God. Another thing Mr. Olinga said, pilgrim note, is that at the end of this cycle, a great universal manifestation will come to unite the planets in one single civilization for this solar system.
Wow. Solar system or galaxy?
Solar system. After that, he said, then the stellar connections will require a much closer affirmation and understanding of the love of God before they'll discover the means of being able to go and come so easily. And he goes on in some other pilgrim notes to say that will lead to stellar unities, and that will lead to galactic unities, that will lead to cosmic unities. We've got an eternity to go through this. And interestingly enough, the pilgrim note says that Chogi Effendi was in a reverie as he said this. He was looking at the ceiling and he could visualize it. And he said, and likewise in the spiritual realms, these progressive unities will take place. Now that struck me, and it also struck me something else Mr. Olinga had said, that the guardian, when he asked him, who is Baha'u'llah? He's a universal manifestation. What is that? He said, as we know from letters, also confirmed in letters, that the universal manifestations their powers can't be limited. That's that oneness, that they're all identical in their inner beings and have all these terrific powers and visionary capacities. But then they also have their individual capacity, which is the one that's also being talked about in these passages from the dispensation, in which they have their history and they have the beginning and the end and a certain emphasis. And it's in that scale of beings that one has to see the greatness of Baha'u'llah. More pilgrim note. Then, I was overwhelmed when I traveled 3 months with Mr. Olinga, translating his talks into Spanish in South America in different countries. And we were sitting around and I'd hear him repeat these things, and he said, the guardian said that then Baha'u'llah is the manifestation for the first 4 stages that the souls from this planet go through after they leave here, which tells us we're not going to go to a universe of souls of the whole universe in the next world, all handily united and fixed and finished. We're going to go to a world that has divisions. Chogi Effendi, how many times from Baha'u'llah's writings we see that he says that he's come to unite all who are in the heavens and on the earth. One of the tablets of the Adrianople period, no, it's Aloy Sayan. That's what's Black Sea, when he got to the Black Sea in his exile. Baha'u'llah says that God commands him to speak of the Spirit. And he starts recounting travels in the inner realm. And he comes across communities in which he tries to proclaim his revelation, and they are very polite and kind. They're not evil souls, but they're stuck on something. Said one of the communities, everything has to do with the movements of the obligatory prayer. 1 inch from the ear, you touch the ear, you don't, all that kind of thing. How do you wash your hands? Another one was, what is the greatest name of God? And he says they're in a perpetual fix. He said, I couldn't stir them. I would stay with them, and then I would hover over them for a month or two. I don't know what that means in the other world, but praying for them, but no sign of change. He goes through, he recounts several places that he went, wherever those places are. And then he gets to one that as soon as he explains who he is, they accept him, and they all rejoice. And he says that they are the souls that Chogyam Finney refers to, and God passes by. He says, when Baha'u'llah entered the prison city in the last stage of his exile, there were those heavenly souls who announced unto the peoples of the earth that all who dwell on earth will be enrolled under these banners. And he said that was from that community. So what are we doing? How is, when he proclaims the oneness of religion, is it all finished? Or he goes and proclaims it and some follow and some don't follow, or some are stuck? If that's the condition here, what's the condition in the next world? We don't know. Anyway, it certainly is a complete, active, inner world. And I've seen have you seen any hints to four stages of the four valleys, but it doesn't quite match up to progressive stages, different states of being. Anyway, moving on.
Second stage.
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. Moving on, we say, what does Baha'u'llah say? He says to you, thou art my lamp. My light is in thee. Get thou from it thy radiance. We read the words of God. We meditate on them. Gradually, they raise us to another level of consciousness. We say, how is that possible? Oh, Christ refers as the rebirth, but then the born-again Christians are such a nuisance that we never want to go there in our thinking. But this is a reality. He was born of the flesh as flesh. He's born of the spirit as spirit. We need to ask ourselves, have I been reborn? Have I created the fervor of sufficient to attain to this goal that the true seeker, it's held before the true seeker in the Igon. New eye, new ear, new mind. What? He invokes, he says, thy hearing is my hearing. Thy sight is my sight. We are created in the image and likeness, and the manifestation stands within us. He is closer and more observant of us than we are of our own selves. Quranic verse. Do we create the fervor necessary to crack through this willingness to follow the secular conclusion that's around us on all sides? The lie, so to speak. Talk about misinformation. What people believe in general about what life is about and what it's for. The fact that they conceive, they even have a choice to make between whether they want to believe in a God that doesn't behave the way I think he should behave. I mean, after all, he's God. He should be able to solve these problems we have here. Source of all good, freed from all error, and the source of all evil is from our own selves. I mean, the problems we have here are definitely man-made problems. How do we arrive at this? How do we get our radiance? How do we... And for this, I think the Guardian has given us prayers and meditations. That book in its totality moves us through all of these various stages of consciousness. Now think of it, when you were 10, 11, or 12, what was in your consciousness, you know? In case we say, how's it possible to change consciousness? And yet puberty comes and our consciousness changes. Our scope, our field of possibilities changes. In the same way, we must see that there is a point of change in us. Now, it doesn't all happen at once, and everyone has an individual experience. But this question that Todd is raising, that we need to view life from the foundation of the way we're created. He has engraven upon us his image and revealed to us his beauty, animating principles of what we do every day, the way we think, the way we pray, the way we meditate, and eventually the way we act, hopefully. Behold me standing within thee, mighty, powerful, and self-subsisting. Who is that? Die in me that I may live in thee. Get the stranger out of the house so the friend can come in and inhabit what the house was created for. The house was created so we can welcome the friend in and be his friend. How do we do all this? I think that's if there's an essence to this weekend and what Todd is presenting, and so is to think on these things, to refocus us on these things. And one of the great sources for this spiritual growth and strength are these verities. Go back to them, rehearse them, think about them. Thank you.